is looking at a couple of ways that the blockchain is used and can be used to do what blockchain does best, and that's, as Jennifer said, is to create trust where trust, for whatever reason, does not exist. But before I jump into those use cases, I want to put blockchain in a context for you, and the context by which I see it, as blockchain as one of a number of coming disruptive forces, some of which sort of Jennifer touched on. So, some music lovers in the room. Here's a picture from a Coldplay, I've got to use British brand here, a Coldplay concert in 2005. And what do we see in this picture? We see people, hands in the air, sort of enthusiastically enjoying the concert, singing along. A few people taking pictures with their camera to put in their scrapbooks later so they can recollect the event. Right? Here's a picture from a Coldplay concert just a decade or so later. And what do we see? We see people, hands in the air, waving, singing along, enjoying the concert. But this time, almost everybody has a smartphone in their hands. Right? And what they're doing is not just taking a couple of pictures for their scrapbooks decades later, but they are actually engaging in real time with people outside the concert. They're posting on social media, they're sharing with their friends, they're engaging in the concert in a whole different way, right? And so the point of this is that one little device, which I'm sure probably all of you have in your pockets or on your tables, and that you use now every day and 1,000 times a day, and our lives have now been transformed just because of that one little device. And the disruption that's caused, the change that's caused, kind of has a ripple effect on society, and has a ripple effect on our companies too, right? So I want to put up this list. So this list is some of the companies from the Fortune 500 just 2 decades ago. 1999, most of you remember that. Just seems like yesterday, right? The turn of the century. And these are names that you're all familiar with, right? That you've heard of, that were top of mind. They were the leaders of the industries. They were companies that had taken decades, maybe a century or more to build. And here we are 20 years later, and they've all disappeared. At the same time, however, here's another list of companies that are on the Fortune 500 now. Now that they are household names, many of them, and they are some of the biggest companies we have. But 20 years ago, they were either small startups or perhaps not even in the minds of their founders. And yet here are companies, right? And we here in the Lehigh Valley are very familiar with this disruption, right? One of those companies on that list is Bethlehem Steel, and we see how that has impact on society, and the way those companies disappear has further impact on society. And so we've seen this disruption going on. And this disruption, it's not just your imagination, it actually is getting faster and faster, right? So we talked about the Fortune 500. So Fortune started doing the Fortune 500 in 1955, right? And if we look at how the different cohorts of Fortune 500 sort of start to disappear. And if we think it just take the half, right? How long does it take for half of the Fortune 500 to disappear? Well, the 1955 cohort here, the black line, it took until 1980, 25 years, for half of those companies to disappear. A decade later, in 1965, it took until 1987 for half of those companies to disappear. 22 years. The 1975 cohort, it took just 16 years for those companies to disappear. And then the 1995 cohort, many of those companies you saw on that list, it took just 12 years for half of those companies to disappear. And think about that, right? We always used to think about mega companies as the stability in society and organization. You know, your parents, grandparents might have gone to work for one of them and spent their entire career there. Now, you think about these largest 500 companies that we have, that you're all familiar with, 10 years from now, probably half of them will be gone. And so there's this disruptive environment that's making this happen, right? And so what were the causes for this set of companies? Well, really, I see three major causes since the Second World War, right? So firstly, globalization. Globalization, we're all familiar with post-World War II. Now almost all companies are subject to some sort of global competition or global influence. Since the mid-90s, we've had the internet and how that's changed society, that's changed our lives and caused a lot of disruption. And then, just in the last dozen years, mobile devices that we just talked about and you're all familiar with. So what I'm interested in is what's coming, right? What are these disruptive forces that are coming down the pipe which are going to cause those companies to disappear in the next 10 years and 15 years? And really, I see on the horizon sort of 8 major disruptors, right? Changing demographics, climate change, big data, vast data, rapid urbanization, peer-to-peer platforms and social commerce, technological advancements, AI, Internet of Things, all of those things that Jennifer talked about, blockchain, which we'll talk about today, and energy generation and storage. And where this, I think, particularly speaks to this group is that I see the natural progression of these things having an impact on society, leading to 3 major divides and increasing divides in society. The first is the wealth divide, right? We're already seeing sort of record or more greater disparity in wealth in this country and in many countries than we've seen in decades since the 1920s. Secondly, the health divide, as people are pushed into being sort of haves versus have-nots in healthcare, and the advances in healthcare and how that may benefit some people and not others. And thirdly, in the technology divide, as people who are able to use and control these developing technologies versus those who get left behind. These are 3 big divides in society, which organizations like the LVCF and many of the organizations that you are involved in are organizations that are hopefully working towards reducing some of these divides and some of these outcomes from these societal shifts. So I'm happy to come back and talk about any of that, but what we're going to talk about today is one of those, and that's blockchain. And as we've talked about sort of already, blockchain in many people's minds equals Bitcoin, right? And cryptocurrencies. And Bitcoin is just the most well-known and the first of the cryptocurrencies, but these cryptocurrencies have been exploding and coming up for all sorts of things. And if you think Bitcoin also has a bit of a dark and unsavory reputation, there are also others, like this picture of Dennis Rodman arriving in North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un, arriving off the plane, emblazoned with a cryptocurrency t-shirt, which is for exactly what you think it's for. And so you see lots of these cryptocurrencies developing, but we've talked a little bit about that. We can certainly talk about the cryptocurrencies, but the idea of this talk was to look at the underlying technology of blockchain and where else can it be used? What are the other applications beyond currencies? So I want to give you sort of 3 examples. The first one, I want to take you to the Azraq refugee camp in the Jordanian desert. Right? This is a refugee camp. Rows and rows of tents like this. It's put on by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and the World Food Programme have this camp. And it contains about 72,000 Syrian refugees. So 72,000, roughly the population of Bethlehem. So think about that. Vast, in the middle of the desert, there's vast rows and rows of these tents of these Syrian refugees. And refugees, if you don't know, the average time it takes for a refugee to be able to, having been displaced from their country, to be able to get back to their country is 17 years. So this is not a short-term problem. This is a long-term problem. So camps like this, they become towns, right? They become places where you are expecting to live for multiple years. But there's also a problem, right? Because many of these people have fled their countries. They have no documentation. How do you prove their identity? How do you know who's in the camp? How do you establish identity for these people? How do you get them food? Right? You've seen, I'm sure, pictures on news of trucks going into various disaster places and food getting was thrown off the trucks and everybody scrambling for food and things like that. And it's like, well, that's not really a good solution to distributing food, and especially not on a long-term basis. You can, as they started out, doing things like vouchers, sort of like food stamps for getting food and then exchanging them for food. But in a place like that, you've got very vulnerable people who are perhaps subject to being extorted or being pressured into giving up their food vouchers. They're living in tents. They're not exactly secure. So somebody can come in and steal things. On the other hand, if you've got a line of people and you're giving out food vouchers, what's to stop somebody getting back in line? They haven't got any identity, so you just kind of go around and around. There's all sorts of problems here, and there's no way of sort of verifying, is everybody getting food, right? And is everybody getting their fair share of food? So how do they solve this problem? Well, blockchain was a solution to this problem for the UN, right? And so what they did is they created digital identities through your eyes, right? Everybody has a unique iPrint retina scan, so that they scan people's retinas, establish people's identities, and then created this account for people, and so they just put money or equivalent, the vouchers for food, into people's account, and so they could go to these massive tents and warehouses where they got food, and they just get their food, and this is a picture here. They just scan their retina, and they can get their food, right? And this solves all of those problems we talked about. Right? It establishes a secure identity for the person. It means that you know who's getting the food. There's no danger of that identity getting stolen. There's no double dipping. There's none of those problems that we had before. And so blockchain uses this. So now the UN is now recommending and working on looking at how, when these refugees leave these camps and get deployed either back to their own country or get moved to a third country, is how they use blockchain to establish not just identity, but as Jennifer's used in her example, but in a different way, how they establish their own credentials and all of those things that they need to be able to settle into a new part of the world. Second example is down to my bowl of tea. Right? So, many of you buy products like tea, this is Lipton Pure Leaf Tea, and on the side here is this logo, the Rainforest Alliance certification. So as a consumer, I can think, wow, this tea is grown in sustainably, it's not damaging the rainforest, and all of those good things that make me feel good about drinking that tea. But how do I know? How does the Rainforest Alliance know? How does Lipton know that this tea is actually come from them? So how does this work right now? So the Rainforest Alliance goes into Assam in India to a tea plantation, and they work with the farmers to work on sustainable development of their tea plantation, and they certify the farm. Right? And then a wholesaler comes in and buys tea from that farm, and they pay a premium to the farmer because it's certified tea, and they also pay a little premium to the Rainforest Alliance, and the Rainforest Alliance gives them a certificate, yes, this is certified tea. Then it goes through all this chain, so that wholesaler buys it on to sells it to somebody else, sells it to somebody else, sells it to somebody else, and eventually Lipton buys it, and they sort of brew it, and you as the consumer get your bottle of tea. But there's all sorts of ways that can fall apart, right? And some of that certification, that certificate may get lost along the way, and then that tea no longer becomes certified. You could have an unscrupulous wholesaler who then kind of mixes their tea with some other tea from something else. And so although the Rainforest Alliance provides this chain of custody certification, and 98% of the time, 99% of the time, that's fine. There's this leakage that occurs as tea that was certified becomes uncertified, and so on and forth through the chain. So I was with the Rainforest Alliance a couple of weeks ago, talking to them about this and how they're thinking about and trying to implement blockchain as this certification process, as Jennifer was talking about, in the supply chain, really going right from the farm all the way through the process on a digitally secure sort of platform, so that Lipton, and actually even the consumer, can then go in and have a transparent look at this whole process. And so, my third and final example, I want to bring us back to the Coldplay concert where we started, all right? And the whole issue of tickets, right? And venue tickets. So, say Coldplay is coming here and you want to go and see them, or your favourite band, or you want to go to a big sporting event, and the tickets are all sold out. What do? Right? You go to the venue hoping to get there, and you hope to see somebody sort of waving a couple of tickets in the air, and a scalper buying them off a scalper. Well, that comes with a whole bunch of problems, right? And firstly, as a consumer, you may pay several $100s for a ticket, take the ticket, you go to the venue, and they say, oh, sorry, that's a forged ticket, you're not getting in. And then you go back to the scalper and, oh, the scalper's long gone. You've lost your money. So that's one big problem with it. Right? Secondly, from the venue's perspective, there are also a number of problems. Right? They've sold a ticket for $100, say, but a consumer has paid $500. And so somebody else is making more money than the venue for this ticket. And how does the venue gets no benefit from that really popular event that they've got. And also, we're more and more concerned with security, and once that ticket gets sold and passed on, the arena has no idea who's in that. And does that make a difference? I mean, we saw big incidents in Manchester just last year, that concert where there was a bomb went off, and kind of how do you know even who's in that arena? Blockchain can actually solve all these problems. Right? And if you have a system in place where a ticket is sold to somebody electronically on a blockchain, even if there's a paper copy there, and that ticket is then tracked from owner to owner. You could even have a system where some percentage of that increase goes back to the venue, so the venue then gets money for the ticket. And this is tracked in real time, so even if you buy the ticket right outside the venue and then go, to the entrance gate, the venue knows that you actually own that ticket. They could use an iPrint just like the UN does, or some other means, and they know then who is in that venue. Right? And so blockchain creates that transparency. It also creates that trust where there really was no mechanism for that trust to exist before. And so we're seeing here in these use cases and many others how blockchain can then create trust even when traditionally we use institutions, right, as trusted mediators for these type of transactions. But sometimes the trust in institutions is at a record low. Sometimes those institutions fail. Sometimes those institutions just aren't there to start with. So blockchain can provide this mechanism for creating trust in these transactions. So I want to leave you with 3 questions to think about as you think about the applications of this for your organization. First is, where do you need more transparency? Where are people wanting to see more of what's happening within your organization? Where do your stakeholders, your multiple stakeholders, your organization, need more trust? And finally, what do you need to do to be able to track whatever it is across multiple parties? If you've got things that move from one place to another, and what do you need to track to enable that transparency and trust to occur? So I'm going to leave you with that. If you want to look more at the whole notion of great divides and those societal shifts which are leading to those great divides, I have a website which is right here, so you can go to the greatdivides.com, and we look forward to your questions and discussion. So thank you very much.